This is the Sean Hannity Show podcast.
What I have here is a copy of Donald Trump's tax returns. We have his federal tax return for 1 year for 2005. I believe this is the only set of the president's federal taxes that reporters have ever gotten a hold of. What we have are these 2 pages, front and back, from the same 1040 form that you might have filled out when you file your taxes. And in terms of what's on here, let me give you the basics. Aside from the numbers being large, these pages are straightforward. He paid $38 million, looks like $38 million in taxes. He took a big write-down of $103 million. More on that later. If you add up the lines for income, he made more than $150 million in that year. Mazel tov. We got these pages. We got this document today from a Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative journalist who's better on financial matters than almost anybody else in the business. His name is David K. Johnston. These pages turned up the other day in his mailbox. David will join us live here in just a moment. But because nobody has had the president's taxes before, we didn't know what to expect. When we showed this 2005 return to the White House to ask them if it's real, we sent this over to the White House tonight, and the White House responded basically with, yep. With all of that, the concerns about whether he's going to be self-dealing in his tax policies, concerns about whether he might have lied or misrepresented his own financial circumstance during the campaign, concerns about whether or not he might have misstated things to the FEC. With all of that, there looms over all of this the big national security worry, right? The big almost existential worry. The greater concern, the worry that this president may be financially beholden to an individual, to an institution, to a country. And now that he's president, we won't know if he tries to use the resources and power of our country to pay off that entity to whom he is beholden. We can't know any of that without getting his tax returns. That's why presidents release their tax returns. That's why there will continue to be unrelenting pressure to find Donald Trump's tax returns, to expose Donald Trump's tax returns. And that pressure will remain every single day that he remains as president. Unless and until he releases them, the pressure will never let up. And that's why somebody has decided to leak a portion of his 2005 tax return, which is how and why we got it tonight. And I am sure it is only the start, but it's a start. And our little piece of it, we just got it. We'll go through it next.
All right, the big takeaway from our top story today, journalism is dead, and we have an information crisis in America that is so deep and so profound, and this is only the latest example. This epic fail by NBC News last night and this morning, they found Donald Trump's taxes from '05, and he paid $38 million. And he paid more in terms of a tax rate than did the corporate parent company of NBC. And he paid more than the Obamas by a long shot. And he paid more percentage-wise than Bernie, more percentage-wise than the Obamas, more percentage-wise than did Mitt Romney. We'll get to that in a second. Also, the latest on this debacle rollout of what is now becoming a civil war with regards to health care. And, of course, the deep state, no evidence whatsoever that the Russians and the Donald Trump campaign colluded and tried to overthrow an election or throw it Donald Trump's way. None. And it keeps getting reported as what's happened last night. Look, there's a part of me that just was bursting out laughing. About 7:30-ish last night, Rachel Maddow tweets out, "We've got Donald Trump's taxes." Lawrence O'Donnell follows up. He's like, "This is what we've been waiting for." I'm like, okay, what's going on? I text a few people that I know. I start getting to the bottom of it. I never watched this network, but I tuned it in last night, and I don't think I laughed any harder than I have in 10 years because there was zero there. I mean, nothing. I mean, so what we have, and this goes to the heart of what I have been trying to communicate here. This is a real, clear, present danger to our democratic republic. We have a freely elected president, and we have a news media that lies with absolutely no qualms whatsoever daily. We've got a deep state. We've got shadow government holdovers, Obama holdovers, basically saboteurs breaking the law almost daily to weekly, all in an effort to undermine and delegitimize the newly elected president. And that's what NBC News did last night. And I called it what it is. This is now a political jihad against the Trump administration and the same people that collaborated and colluded with Hillary Clinton and couldn't believe that Donald Trump could win. And then when it happened, they've gone into a deep state of shock and denial. And now they're trying to overthrow a president that you elected. Now this, and I got to tell you, this is also a new low. Bill Binney was on this program. We've been telling you about privacy issues. This could be the end of privacy as we now know it in America. And that should concern every one of you. Bill Binney, 32-year veteran, National Security Agency, 32 years of his life dedicated to protecting our country, becomes a whistleblower because he says every single text, every phone call, every email you send is being gathered by the government. They have these meta storage centers in places like Utah and elsewhere around the country, and they hold on to your information and can literally find it in a matter of minutes. That's pretty dangerous. That's a little over the top. Then you add WikiLeaks to it. And the idea that, all of this stuff, all these tools have been developed, and then you question whether or not the deep state, maybe some of the career bureaucrats or the Obama holdovers. Now, I'm being very careful here. I have great respect for intelligence. It's a necessary tool in an evil world, and we do have many enemies. And it is a tool to gather, to use, to know what people are plotting and planning and scheming. I get it. But when you use it against your own citizens, then we've got a big problem here. Anyway, so you have these Trump haters over at NBC. I was very interested to see what Matt Lauer would do this morning, and he ends up covering this story. Now, he's tainted by it. It's the entire news organization of NBC, just like the entire news organization, if you want to call it that, alt-left propaganda. What I say, alt-left, these are radical leftists in the media colluding with radicals like Obama and Hillary. That's why I call them alt-left propaganda. They don't tell the truth. They spin whatever lies that they're the people they worship that they want elected tell them to spin. Destroy Trump media. They want to destroy him. And you see it every day. And it's gotten worse by the day. And all of this should concern you. You've got last night, we've got our hands on President Trump's 2005 tax returns. Now, just on the surface of this, and she claimed that and by the way, if you get the information, she's protected as a journalist. There's no crime I don't see or hear, although some suspect. I talked to a couple attorneys that suspect there could be issues with this, but we do have laws. 26 U.S. Code 7213. It shall be unlawful for any officer or employee of the United States or any person described in the section or any office or employee of any such person or any former employer or officer willfully to disclose to any person, except as authorized in this title, any return or return information. In other words, your private tax returns are supposed to be secret. And Rachel, no, Donald Trump does not by law have to reveal his tax returns to anybody. And after the way you tried to tear this thing apart last night and spin this in a way that is absolutely dereliction of duty and void of any integrity whatsoever, why should he release anything? I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't give one single page out to any of you in the media. And whoever it is that got a hold of this, now, perhaps it came from within the deep state. Perhaps it came from somebody associated that does Donald Trump's taxes. Perhaps they lied about where they got it, the guy that said he found it in the mailbox. But the way they spun this conspiracy is beyond anything I've ever seen or heard before. Now, anyway, it's what they did. Whoever released this committed a felony, just like the leak on General Flynn is a felony, just like all the other intelligence leaks are felonies. You understand? Laws are being broken here every single day. Anyway, what did we learn after all? By the way, that would be a $5,000 fine, up to 5 years in prison, that kind of felony. So the White House revealed before they actually came out with this, they were anticipating its release. Okay, so what did we find? Donald Trump in the year 2005 paid $38 million on $150 million in income. Later, we'll tell you what the next show after Rachel, Lawrence O'Donnell, the things they said about Melania, somebody should notice what they said last night and really did nothing to correct. You know, we've been reporting on all of these deep state actors. Where did this return come from? Okay, now, it's one thing. Some of you will say, well, Hannity, you reported WikiLeaks. I'm not saying Rachel Maddow doesn't have a right to report it. But we do have a right to determine who is breaking the law in the deep state. We do have a right to know which intelligence officials, probably a very small percentage, probably high ranking, that are purposely trying to hurt the president on a daily basis. And this is part of that deep state that I have been talking about. And I told you how weeks before Obama left office, he altered Executive Order 12333, which allows the widespread sharing of the raw data collected by American intelligence agencies across 17 government agencies. Well, that's an additional 16 agencies and their employees who gain access to top secret intelligence they never had access to before. Now, why would they want that? They'd want that because that means they could probably hide whoever is leaking this stuff. And that then, therefore, becomes a problem. But what we're seeing here is far worse. And this is now a clear and present danger that has emerged to our democratic republic. It's threatening our country. We have people within our government committing felonies on a weekly basis. Saboteurs trying to prevent President Trump from doing the job that you, the American people, elected him to do. And aside from his taxes, when you take a look at all the other leaks that have been going on, it's fairly substantial. You know, now we have deep state actors breaking the law, releasing the president's taxes, wanting to destroy him. It wasn't bad enough that Obama used the IRS as a weapon against conservatives and took the criminalization of political differences to a level we've never seen before. Now, the sad thing is NBC thought they had a scoop last night until it didn't take long to figure out that the parent company of NBC paid a lower effective tax rate than Donald Trump in 2005. It didn't take long to figure out the Obamas paid a lower rate than Donald Trump. It didn't take long to find out that Mitt Romney had paid a lower rate and Bernie Sanders had paid a lower rate. I didn't see any deductions for underwear like the Clintons used to use in years gone by. Old underwear that they deduct on their tax returns. So that's not really the issue. And when I said last week that the president needs this purge of the deep state, I never mentioned U.S. attorneys. I was talking about those leakers in the intelligence community and now maybe within the IRS. And as I said, these leaders of the propaganda destroy Trump media, they'll do anything at this point to take down this president. That's a problem. And I've given you so many examples of this. Now, we're going to continue this. Our other top stories today, the latest on this disastrous rollout in the Republican civil war over health care and much more, and no evidence at all of any collusion with Russia. Wait till I tell you the Russia connection they tried to spin last night on this tax story.
Hannity Headline, a bite-sized version of the show that you can take with you everywhere you go. To sign up today for Hannity Headlines, go to Hannity.com.
You know, I love Twitter fighting myself. I really enjoy it. And my buddy Michael Cohen, who is the president's personal attorney, doesn't work for the administration, you know, calling out Joe about saying this morning, what did he say this morning exactly? Do you know, Linda? That Trump might have released it himself?
Yeah, he basically is saying that Trump leaked this himself to make it look positive, and Michael Cohen, who's counsel to the Trump organization, is saying that it's not true.
You know, I don't even know what to say. Was he going to go after liberal? I mean, he's so jumped the shark now. He's so out of it at this point that it's borderline pathological. You know, one moment he's kissing up to Trump and kissing his ass, and I know because I talked to Trump once about it. And then the next moment he's like schizophrenic. He wants to keep his job on that NBC network of his. It is the single worst television show I've ever seen in my life. It is god awful, and I don't even know what to say. You know, Fox kills it. CNN kills that show. I mean, I'm like, why does it? And they create this perception that people watch. I've never seen a show in all my years in cable, now 21 years at the Fox News Channel. I've never seen a single show that gets such horrible ratings as his. that literally nobody watches. Well, the important people watch it. That's their argument. The important people watch it. That's our excuse for not getting a mass audience. Well, it would actually be better if everybody that you can possibly get watches your show. Ratings and revenue usually dictate whether or not you keep your job. If that was the case for him, he would have been long gone. You know, I'm going to tell you what the little secret is, and I know this for a fact. Liberal Joe, thinks he's presidential material. Liberal Joe thinks, well, Donald Trump won, I can win. Liberal Joe imagines himself in the Oval Office. Liberal Joe does not have the temperament to be a president, a congressman, for reasons we will disclose at some point, or not even a dog catcher. Liberal Joe, I mean, there's just so much out there about this guy. I have such self-restraint. All right, we'll get back to our top story on the other side of this.
We know you never want to miss the Sean Hannity Show. And now you never have to. Just sign up for Hannity Headlines. A bite-sized version of the show that you can take with you on your laptop, your mobile phone, everywhere you go. Even to your liberal in-laws' place in Vermont.
Yeah.
And after a few hours of that, you'll be glad you brought Sean along. To sign up today for Hannity Headlines, go to Hannity.com.
All right, 25 now till the top of the hour. All right, Epic, C, capital F-A-I-L. All right, sorry. Just taking, hey, Liberal Joe, you kissed that Barack Obama's ass enough. Do you still lie and say you're conservative? Are you proud of at NBC News and the Epic fail? Last night. Blah, blah, blah. Perfect. I have 0 characters left. Bing, tweet. All right. You know what I love about Twitter, Linda? I just love it. I think it's like the most fun you can have, you know, fighting these idiots and not wasting any really great airtime. So I see Michael Cohen is all over Liberal Joe. Liberal Joe, is he proud of what NBC News did last night? You know, that's how desperate he wants a job. He's had to compromise every principle he's ever had. And now he has to, okay, well, Donald Trump paid a higher rate of taxes in 2005 than Obama did. By the way, if you actually look at the numbers, I just got this earlier today in my email. Donald Trump this 1 year may have actually paid more taxes than the Obamas paid their entire lives. I mean, in that one single year, pays a higher rate than the parent company of NBC News, paid a higher rate than Bernie Sanders, paid a higher rate than who else? Mitt Romney. I mean, they paid a serious amount of money. And, you know, somehow this was the big reveal last night. Somehow this was it. We've got him. We finally have him. I have some interesting data points here. Okay, so this is what I got. The Obama total federal taxes paid from 2000 to 2015. $6,179,659. They paid, what, 18.8 or 6% in 2015 alone. And I'm thinking, okay, Donald Trump in 1 year paid more than the Obamas paid their entire life. And he paid a higher percentage in this big year of 2005 than the Obamas paid in 2015. And really, we're going to get lectured. You see, liberals, I've always told you, they're generous only with other people's money. And the reason Joe won't go after his parent company is because Joe wants a job. Joe acts like he's all tough and courageous, but Joe wants his job. And Joe knows that it was an epic fail last night, an overhyped news development by a conspiracy network that has lost all credibility. So if you really want to get to the end of this, let's set the record straight. NBC is not a news network. It's an Obama deep state propaganda television network. End of sentence. You know, look, I mean, this got so out of control last night. This is what they would have you believe, which I found probably the most humorous aspect of this. So NBC didn't discover it on their own. They were going to bring on a guest that found the tax returns. They just showed up in their mailbox, which then leads the morning show host over at NBC suggesting Donald Trump probably put them there himself. It's not that far-fetched, you know. Michael Cohen, Donald Trump's personal attorney, is in a Twitter war right now. I was just offering him a little bit of support out there because he's right. Where's your evidence? Where's your proof? Just like there's no evidence, no proof about Russia. That's why I keep saying journalism is dead and we have an information crisis in the country. They lie to you with regularity, and it's all of these news networks. Nobody paid attention to the collusion that went on during the campaign, the collaboration that went on during the campaign, because they all supported Hillary Clinton. Nobody dealt with the deep, radical, ideological indoctrination of Obama except me and a couple of others before he got elected in 2008. There's Joe on the White House lawn broadcasting his show during the Obama administration. Trust me, I had no such invitation for good reason, because I was doing what nobody else seemingly at NBC had the courage to do, or a lot of other people in the media. And it's not about me, but you got to understand, this is how they spun this thing. Like, we've got it. This is what we've been waiting for, they're tweeting out. Okay, so I tune in. What do they got? Well, we got his 2 pages of his tax return from 2005. And Donald Trump paid $38 million in taxes. And then we quickly found out it was a higher rate than the parent company of NBC News. But Donald Trump, you see, in 2005 in Palm Beach owned an expensive property that he paid $40 million for, and he more than doubled his money. And then therefore, because those Russians knew something none of us knew, and certainly nobody at NBC knew, even on October the 8th of 2016, and that is that Donald Trump was going to be elected president, because they colluded, of course, with the Trump campaign, because that's what you hear on this network every single day and night. And because Donald Trump made a profit and he sold the property to a Russian oligarch, somehow that then it created a situation where Donald Trump was somehow beholden to the Russians because he sold this property in 2005, and the Russians knew that he was going to be president come 2017 and elected in 2016. That's the crap they're trying to tell you last night. I mean, I got to be honest. I tweeted out at one point last night. I said, this is pretty amazing. I agree with Anderson Cooper and Van Jones, because even they see through this crap and this big hype. You know, I was watching my friend Geraldo. He was on with Melissa Francis on Fox earlier today, and I've known Geraldo. He's the nicest human being you're ever going to meet in your life. He really is, and he's one of the few journalists that has had a 50-year career in New York. I mean, it's amazing, his career. All right, but one of the projects that he was engaged in, Al Capone's vote, they were comparing it to that. There's no there. And he has a great sense of humor. He's laughing about it. And that's just the type of guy he said. The serious side of this is, okay, we now have another deep state leak. We now have another attempt to undermine and delegitimize the president. And, you know, nobody seemed to care over at NBC News when the IRS was targeting conservative and Tea Party groups. They didn't seem to care when President Obama, he said it 25 times, he didn't have the constitutional authority through executive action to undo immigration laws, and then he did it anyway. I didn't see them complaining about him not listening to what his own interpretation of what the Constitution enables him to do as the president of the executive branch of government. You can't just bypass the legislative branch of government. We have checks and balances, co-equal branches. They didn't seem to care. Now, you know, if it wasn't so absolutely bizarrely conspiratorial and laughable, you know, I couldn't watch it with a straight face. I don't think you can make an SNL skit that's even better than this. You know, trying to piece together that he sold the property in 2005 to a Russian oligarch, and they knew that Trump was going to be president, but NBC News had no idea he was going to be president. And if you don't believe me, go back and watch the coverage. We showed it last night on TV. They were stunned, like most of the media, and it was a funeral on the set at NBC when they had to project that Donald Trump will be the 45th president of the United States of America. They couldn't believe it. I wonder if the Andy Lack, who runs that place over there, I wonder if he ever sold the property. I wonder if he ever made a profit in 2005. What are they going to now, you know, what's tonight's big story? They're going to have a big NBC News investigation questioning whether or not the moon landing occurred. They're going to investigate the JFK assassination. They've got new information. They're going to investigate Abraham Lincoln's assassination. So the Russians knew in 2005 Trump would be president in 2016, yet NBC News didn't think that was possible the night of the election. You're living in, this is a much bigger problem than you think. By the way, a funny story that came out today, I forget where I saw this, but, the Heat Street review of public records show a total of 6 current prominent MSNBC pundits have recently settled federal or state tax liens, while one still has tax problems. Reverend Al Sharpton, and then a bunch of Joanne Reed, whoever she is. I guess, let's see. Chris Matthews apparently had a little problem with his taxes. And some other people Torrey had a problem with his taxes. I don't know if he still works there. I have no idea, but it's, really, we're going to go after Donald Trump. Donald Trump should never release his taxes. If this is the way the media is going to treat it, why should he? Why? Because he's been successful? Because he made a profit? Profit's a bad word in the mind of a liberal. Not a bad word in my lexicon. It's actually a good thing if you buy property. It's most people's biggest investments. And by the way, this Trump tax return story, it discredited the New York Times bombshell. And maybe the president needs to send NBC a thank you note, because the Daily Caller points out October 1st, the New York Times had a headline that Donald Trump tax records show he could have avoided taxes for nearly 2 decades. Oopsie daisy. He paid $38 million. Are they going to retract that in the New York Times tomorrow morning? I tend to doubt it. Even the Washington Post recognizes this was a disaster last night. Their headline was the 2005 Donald Trump tax return as a nothing burger. British intelligence, by the way, is denying that they wiretapped Trump. I'm sure I'll take them at their word. Who knows what anybody's involved with in terms of investigations these days. But this obsession, I go back to Sarah Carter and John Solomon. And what are we finding? There has been no evidence of any collusion. And their reporting says that even though law enforcement, that there was a FISA warrant looking into any Russian interference into the election, and any ancillary search into the Trump servers found nothing. And the same thing with the other warrant that apparently was put out, and nobody in intelligence and nobody in law enforcement will put this to bed. And the media, do they focus on the fact that the New York Times reported Trump Tower was wiretapped, or McClatchy or the BBC or any other news organization? There's many that did. No, they wanted Donald Trump said it. Well, he was only quoting the New York Times, I assume. And it appears something might have happened in some place in some way. We now have leading senators calling on the Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, to immediately launch an investigation into efforts by the Obama administration to sway foreign elections themselves. Well, finally, somebody's picking up what I have pointed out, that, in fact, taxpayer dollars were used by the Obama administration all in an effort to try and unseat the sitting prime minister of what was supposed to be our closest ally, who Obama betrayed over and over again, Israel, and Prime Minister Netanyahu. Now, back to Obamacare for just a minute, one of our other stories we're following today. And so you got the fake news Democratic media treating the CBO analysis of the Republican health care bill as the Holy Grail. I'm going to get into it at the top of the next hour. What a horrific rollout. It looks like the gang that can't shoot straight. They've got so many things wrong, and nobody's listening to my solution. My solution is get the Freedom Caucus, get the study group, get the vice president, get the Health and Human Secretary Price in there, get people from the White House, Reince and others, and Bannon in there. And then I would bring in Senator Cotton and Senator Paul and Senator Cruz and, Marco Rubio and Senator Lee and let them all hammer this out and come out with a consensus bill that's going to work like they should have done before they ever rolled it out. And if this fails, they will have done such a disservice to the president. And because the rollout was so bad, now the president's wasting all his time on fixing the mess that the legislative branch created by not having an answer, a consensus bill in 8 years of talking about it. Good God, it's so ridiculous to me. Anyway, so they talk about the CBO numbers being right. Well, if you look what they wrote about Obamacare, the CBO said the Affordable Care Act would trim the deficit. The reverse happened. It said 24 million people would be enrolled in the exchanges by now. Well, they blew it by about 11 million. Well, actually, the total is below 11 million. They're off by more than half. Less than half of what they predicted happened. Despite the dismal enrollment numbers, the CBO is projecting the exchanges to cover 19 million people still by 2020 if nothing changes. In fact, enrollment leveled off last year. At best, you'd have 11 million. So they'd be off again. More likely, the program is in, as the Aetna CEO says, a death spiral. So now the CBO is insisting the repeal of the individual mandate is going to drive 18 million people to drop their coverage. Well, that's because they're not mandated anymore, number one, and they have no clue how many people will look for new solutions for health care, like Dr. Umber of Wichita, Kansas, and Atlas MD. Which is why I keep saying to Republicans, get your act together and get the bill that you're supposed to have that fosters and creates competition and free market capitalism, because if you do that, then the people are going to buy the plans at the best price that offer the best amount of care. And many people will move to catastrophic policies that give them maybe one checkup a year, or they'll go to a cooperative for $50 a month and they can have unlimited care like in Wichita. Hey, listen, I want to tell you, if you have a student loan, I want you to put a lot of money in your pocket. I'm talking about TRYSOFI.com, TrySofi.com. It doesn't matter if you have a government loan, a private loan, or multiple loans. You can consolidate your student loans into one new loan, a simple loan with a lower rate. Now, many TrySofi.com members, they're cutting their rates by as much as half. Now, the most impressive number is the average TrySofi.com member that has a student loan will save over $19,000 that they would otherwise be giving away. Well, that's money for a down payment for a house or a new car. So the bottom line is, take 2 minutes of your time. There's no obligation. Checking the new rate will not impact your credit score. Find out how much you can save if you have a student loan. Do it now. Go to TrySofi.com, TRYSOFI.com. We'll continue. All right, we have a lot more ground to cover. All right, what has now become a real distraction, a horrible rollout of this health care bill. How does this get salvaged? You know, why did they handle it this way after 8 years is beyond me. I don't think there's any excuse for it. I think it's the Washington way of doing things, and it's beyond frustrating. But failure should not be an option. So that means my advice to the Republican Party is get your act together. Get everybody, get Club for Growth, Americans for Prosperity, Freedom Works, Heritage Action. Get them all in a room. Cato, get them all in a room. Get in there, Lee, Paul, Cruz, Rubio, Cotton. Get the Freedom Caucus in there, the study group in there. Lock the door, throw away the key, and fix the bill. And do it behind closed doors. And do what you should have done before you released the stupid thing. You put the president in a horrible position. Same with the vice president. We'll continue.
This is the Sean Hannity Show podcast.
We ran for repeal and replace in 2010. We ran on repeal and replace in 2012, in 2014, in 2016. Oh, by the way, we spent 6 months last year developing a replacement plan. We ran on that replacement plan.
But these senators know that. They're not unfamiliar.
This has been a long and deliberative process. Suggesting that this is moving fast, going through 4 committees, going through regular order, saying we were going to do this for 7 years, and now coming to the point where we're actually on the cusp of keeping our word, I hardly think that that is rushing things. The point I'd say is this is historic. This is historic and it's significant. And if we don't act, the system's going to collapse. And the beautiful thing about this plan that we're proposing, it's more freedom, it's more choices, it's more markets, it's lower prices, which gets us better access.
The Republicans' American Health Care Act versus Obamacare. Obamacare is full of job-destroying mandates. The new plan eliminates them. Obamacare puts bureaucrats in control. The Republicans' plan puts patients and doctors in charge. Obamacare stuck families with soaring premiums. The new plan provides more choices and lower costs.
Repeal and replace Obamacare.
Tell Congressman Labrador to vote with President Trump.
If the Affordable Care Act, if Obamacare is repealed, we are looking at hundreds of thousands of people who got Medicaid extension losing that. And how many of those folks will die? How many of those folks will lose the opioid treatment that they now have? It is a lot. I don't know exactly, but it is a whole lot. But what really bothers me is that when you look at the Republican bill, it should not be seen as a health care bill, because throwing millions of people off of health care is not health care legislation. What it should be seen as is a huge tax break for the wealthiest people in this country.
All right, there you hear the ongoing, intramural battle, discussion, debate over what I say should have been handled behind closed doors before any rollout. Now, the ad part of what you just heard was these are the ads that are now being run in the districts of, for example, some of the Freedom Caucus members as a means of pressuring them and putting political pressure on them to support the Ryan bill without any significant amendments or changes. Anyway, Daniel Horowitz, senior editor of Conservative Review, has been all over this now for weeks, and we've been following his writings. And Chris Jacobs is a senior healthcare policy analyst at the Texas Public Policy Foundation and the founder of Juniper Research Group. And welcome both of you to the program. Appreciate it.
Great to be back with you, Sean.
Thanks, Sean.
Daniel, let me start with you. Let's start with the political attacks on those that want this to be more free market reform, those that are concerned about remaining taxes, and those that are concerned about a new entitlement.
You know, this is an unbelievable tactic we first saw with the Gang of Eight bill, where you had Mark Zuckerberg funding these so-called conservative groups to put out ads touting amnesty as border security in conservative districts. They know what conservatives want to hear. They know our talking points and our policies are better than theirs. The problem is they dishonestly run their policies as our policies. So they're doing the same thing here. The American Action Network is very closely aligned with leadership, with Ryan and Boehner staffers, a lot of never-Trumpers. These individuals, they got their single biggest check over the last number of years from Big Pharma. Big Pharma supported Hillary Clinton. Now, why would they support Hillary Clinton if they're a healthcare group? Well, it's obviously because they wanted the status quo, and this is exactly what the GOP plan does. It keeps most of Obamacare and ensures a perpetual need for bailouts. So this is extremely dishonest that they're running these ads passively, aggressively against conservatives.
You know, they're also saying it's not happening, but I've had congressmen like Mark Maddow send me the ads that are running in his district. So, in fact, they are running. Where's the money coming from?
No, absolutely. That's the problem. They're coming from the big industries. It's hard to tell where this exact check came from because, it takes a little while to document this. But in general, they've gotten a lot of money from Big Pharma. And that's really what this is, and it cuts to the core of what's happening. The existing business interests want the status quo, albeit with more subsidies and more bailouts. They don't want a free market. They don't want more choice and competition where startups could come and revolutionize and do to them what Uber did to taxis or what, Amazon did or Southwest Airlines did. That's the vision we need to chart forward, and we're not going to do it until we cut the lobbyists loose.
Chris Jacobs, what's your take on the bill? And when you have all of these conservative groups, and I've been mentioning them almost every day, the Cato Institute, Heritage Action, Americans for Prosperity, Freedom Works, Club for Growth. Then you have conservative groups, conservatives in the study committee, conservatives in the Freedom Caucus. And then you have conservative/libertarian senators like Rand and Ted and Lee and Senator Cotton and Marco Rubio. It's problematic.
Sure. And we actually have a list on our website, texaspolicy.com, comparing the House Republican plan to Obamacare. The House Republican plan keeps the Obamacare subsidies for at least 2 years. In fact, it expands them. It keeps virtually all of the benefit mandates that are driving up premiums, and it keeps the Medicaid expansion. Rather than repealing all of the benefit mandates requiring a 60-year-old male to purchase maternity coverage, repealing those mandates would actually lower premiums. But this bill doesn't do that. Instead, the bill creates a $100 billion slush fund bailout fund to give to health insurers to, in theory, lower premiums that way. Well, subsidizing higher costs, that's the Obamacare way, throwing taxpayer money at a problem created by government regulation. That's not the way to lower costs. The way to lower costs is to remove the mandates and actually lower the underlying healthcare costs.
So, in other words, if you're giving money to the health insurers, you're not having a free market and you have all these government subsidies. Now, there are two real challenges. Let's put these on the table for the Republicans, regardless of any bill that they're going to pass, and that's how they pass it. I mean, you've got obstructionists in the Democratic Party. None of them are going to support any bill that the Republicans are putting forward. None of them. So they have to use the reconciliation process, or else just get rid of the filibuster altogether, which I guess they could do, which is called the nuclear option. And we know Harry Reid did it on certain appointments and judges and so on and so forth. But so assuming they have to use reconciliation, I get the process is different and it has to be attached to a budget bill. All right, fair enough. I understand what they're saying about a three-step process here, but by the time they actually get it to where they want it to be, that's a problem. The other problem is they're claiming, well, they've got moderates in the House and they're complaining about what the Freedom Caucus is saying, although we're not hearing from them at all. They haven't complained once that I've heard.
Sure, and I think there are legitimate strengths with the reconciliation process, but frankly, some of the provisions in the House bill may not make it through the Senate reconciliation process with the parliamentarian. The pro-life protections in the new entitlement, the new tax credit, they are quite possibly going to get stripped out in the Senate process under the Senate parliamentary rules. Some of the eligibility verification provisions preventing illegal immigrants from receiving these tax credits, they could get stripped out in the Senate under the parliamentary rules. It is much easier to repeal the insurance regulations under the Senate's parliamentary rules that they are budgetary in nature. It's much easier to repeal them than to create new programs like this new entitlement tax credit that we're talking about in the bill. So the House leadership strategy from a procedural standpoint just doesn't make sense.
And your take on that, Chris?
No, I mean, Sean,
I'm sorry, Daniel.
Yeah, if you put together everything leadership has been saying, depending on who is doing the talking and what audience they're talking to, I've discovered 4 different narratives. They either say this is full repeal, or they say we can't repeal the regs because of the process. Or they
but in truth, even the 2015 bill, and Randis said it himself, and I did a deep dive on it myself. Neither the 2015 bill nor this bill fully repeals it. So we have to be honest here. There's never been that full repeal.
Sure,
and in large part,
and Sean, at the time, I actually criticized it because my concern was if we ever won back the White House, that would be the ceiling instead of the floor for what we can do. The bottom line is we're not going to have a destroyed healthcare system in perpetuity because of Elizabeth McDonough. She's the parliamentarian. She's a nice lady, but ultimately the Republican majority controls the interpretation of precedent there. And again, you got to look at what they're saying. They first say that this is full repeal. Then they say process, undermines us. Then they say they're politically concerned about pre-existing conditions. And then they say, oh, wait, Tom Price will do it administratively. Those are 4 different narratives, and they conflict with each other. They can't all be true, and in my view, each one of them is not true. The reality is, since 2012, Republicans have been very scared to talk about getting rid of the insurance coverage mandates. But if you're not going to get rid of them, you will not bring down prices, and that's what CBO at its core said earlier this week.
Let me ask, Chris, if you can answer this question. Can the Republicans get in a room? Do you see a possibility that all of these conservative libertarian think tanks, that all of these different factions that are so adamantly against this bill, do you think they can hammer out a deal that is going to be the best we can get, that will improve health care, lower costs, create the competition that is so necessary to drive down costs and increase better coverage? Do you think it can get done, or is this something that is going to be an impossible task and that they're going to try and strong-arm everybody and intimidate them?
Well, I sure hope so. I was privileged enough to go to the White House on Friday and meet with Vice President Pence and Secretary Price, and they've been very outspoken in their outreach to conservative groups, some of the conservative groups you mentioned. I used to work for the Vice President when he was in Congress, and he always said that iron sharpens iron. And I think that's what conservatives need to do here, push for a bigger repeal, to go out and repeal all of those insurance regulations that are driving up premiums, and to move this bill in a better direction.
All right, guys, stay right there. We'll come back. We'll talk more about that when we pick it up here on the other side. 800-941-SEAN if you want to be a part of this extravaganza in this program. By the way, we're going to talk about this disaster of Rachel Maddow last night. I mean, it was It's so far beyond anything I think I've ever seen in cable news history. We have the governor of Mississippi that's going to stop by in the bottom of the hour. Quick break, right back. We'll continue on the other side.
Hannity Headline, a bite-sized version of the show that you can take with you everywhere you go. To sign up today for Hannity Headlines, go to Hannity.com.
All right, as we continue with Daniel Horowitz and Chris Jacobs. Chris, I want to go back to this chart that you put out there, and you have Obamacare and the GOP proposal, and you go through the similarities in the different bills. It's a little alarming on a lot of different fronts. When you discussed this with Vice President Pence, who's a pretty conservative guy, what did he say?
Well, I think the vice president was very open to amending the bill and making it a more conservative piece of legislation. We certainly were outspoken. In fact, I wore my red tape cufflinks. This is literal old government red tape to the meeting at the White House to signify that we have a concern about all of these regulations and how they're driving up premiums. And I think conservative groups in general want to say, rather than preemptively surrendering to an unelected Senate parliamentarian, let's have that debate. Let's put these repeal of these Obamacare regulations in the House bill, and let's have the debate about taking steps to reduce premiums and give American people relief.
Well, I think that's the thing. How do you answer Daniel Horowitz? Because we can predict everything that any liberal is going to say on any topic because they haven't changed their talking points in 30 years. Republicans want grandma to die. They'll make ads, granny in a wheelchair, Paul Ryan throwing her off a cliff. Republicans want children to die. Now, at some point, we've got to realize that when somebody is shot or somebody gets hit by a car or if somebody has a heart attack and they don't have any insurance at all, they're going to walk into a hospital and they're going to be taken care of. What do you think the best answer is to deal with that?
Sure. I mean, the enduring lesson of Obamacare is that, and this is the reality before our eyes, is that you can't regulate and subsidize your way into solvency. Granny is dying right now. There was a terrible story of a cancer patient in eastern Tennessee that can't get coverage now because despite all the subsidies, because of the regs, eastern Tennessee does not have any insurers left. 30% of the counties have one insurer. That's a monopoly. We're all born to hate monopolies.
No, we all agree Obamacare is collapsing of its own weight. But I'm asking, for the Republicans, because this is problematic, because they now have to go to the country. And the media, they're colluding with the Democrats, and they'll find every person that says that they died or a family member died because of the Republicans. How do you fix that? How do you deal with those patients that decide not to have insurance and have nothing, but we're not going to turn them away because they're having a heart attack?
So the first thing is you got to make insurance great again. You got to make the individual market great again. And that starts with getting rid of the regulations. There's no shortcut. You have to isolate and minimize the problem. So it's a matter of more competition, getting rid of the antitrust exemption for insurance, having startups come in. It's a matter of portability. Obviously, cross-state lines has become universal among Republicans. That's an area of agreement. Tax equity between the employer market and the individual market. And then cost consciousness. So people will then want to buy insurance when they're young, just like a life insurance plan. They could hold it forever, and that isolates and minimizes the problem. But I do think we made a mistake because we stopped litigating the case against the status quo. We do have to remind people that under the status quo, even the people with the lavish subsidies will not benefit because, like Eastern Tennessee, half the rest of the country will not have any insurers left.
All right. Great answer, I think, by both of you. And really good answer, Daniel. Appreciate it. 800-941-SEAN, our toll-free telephone number. You want to be a part of the program. We'll take a quick break. At the bottom of this half hour, we'll check in briefly with the governor of Mississippi who's going to drop by. And we also have at the top of the hour what I guess anybody could just say the single biggest fraud on television, literally unfolding before our eyes last night on NBC News. And we'll tell you about that. 800-941-SEAN. Your call's coming up as well as we continue.
We know you never want to miss the Sean Hannity Show. And now you never have to. Just sign up for Hannity Headlines. A bite-sized version of the show that you can take with you on your laptop, your mobile phone, everywhere you go, even to your liberal in-laws' place in Vermont.
So,
Yeah. And after a few hours of that, you'll be glad you brought Sean along. To sign up today for Hannity Headlines, go to Hannity.com.
All right, 25 till the top of the hour. Our toll-free telephone number, 800-941-SEAN. You want to join us. It was so funny today. Trump going after the media was hilarious. You can always see it because he points to them in the back of the room and he starts waving his finger at them and the crowd starts laughing hysterically. The media's become such a joke, and we'll get to that. Back to the epic fail of NBC yesterday at the top of the hour with Joe Concha. You know, I've been trying for the longest time to get people in Congress. I won't even tell you how many senators, how many people in the administration, how many congressmen and women that I've tried to get in contact with Dr. Umber of Atlas MD. Now, I know Newt Gingrich is going to call this week because he told me, and Newt has always been an ideas person, but, you know, he's on to something that's beyond spectacular in my mind, and creating a cooperative medical practice with, I think, 5 of his colleagues, and they all have about 600 patients each, and it's $50 a month per adult, $10 a month per child, and it includes unlimited care. And he negotiates directly with the pharmaceutical companies for all the major medicines that people would need, even some cancer medicines and chemotherapy medicines, and he gets a 90-95% discount on all of those pharmaceuticals and dispenses it right to his patients, and they save a fortune. So anybody could afford it, which is great news. And the other thing he does is, let's say you need an x-ray or something, you get it for pennies, 43 cents, I think he said, because they give it to you at cost, and it's included in your care. And if you want a catastrophic plan to add to the 24/7, 365 coverage his practice office offers, which includes stitches and exams and antibiotics and broken legs and arms and whatever. But if you need a catastrophic plan to back you up if in case, God forbid, you have a heart attack, a bad accident, you get cancer, well, you can get that as accompanying coverage at a very low rate. Catastrophic plans are very inexpensive compared to normal insurance, and they usually tend to have a high deductible. You take the deductible you can afford. I mean, it's probably going to hurt everybody. Let's say you got a $5,000 deductible. That's fine. It's going to hurt, or a $10,000 deductible, but you may end up with a $500,000 worth of medical coverage. And that's what catastrophic insurance is all about. And young people, if they get a catastrophic plan, then they are prepared for a worst-case scenario, but they're not paying for coverage that they're not going to need for another 40 years. It just makes sense. And I was so impressed. Linda talked to the governor of Mississippi, Phil Bryant, and he actually picked up the phone, heard about Dr. Umber, and had a conversation with him. And I'm very impressed, Governor. Welcome to the Sean Hannity Show. How are you,
Sean,
sir?
Thank you. Look, I got a hold of Dr. Josh because of your show. I took your advice. You know, governors can do that type of thing. We don't have to have a committee meeting. And so we got a hold of Dr. Josh.
By the way, this is why I love the South. You know, it's called common sense. Go ahead, keep going.
He just picked up the phone, called him. We Googled him. I actually put in doctor on Sean Hannity, and we found his location, his number there in Kentucky. Gave him a call. What a great guy! What a visionary! And look, I want that plan. I want to go to Dr. Josh. That's exactly what I would like to see for my family and a lot of families in Mississippi now that because of Obamacare are losing their insurance. They can't afford it. They can't afford the copay. Now, thank goodness the President and Congress now is working on the American Health Care Act, but Dr. Josh, as he identified himself when I got him on the phone, he and I had about an hour-long conversation, and how exciting it was, Sean. You know, one of the things that we're, as governors, and there's 33 Republican governors, and we're trying to convince Congress, look at this continuum of cost. It continues to go up. And so we're going to have to deal with the cost of health care no matter what plan is passed, no matter what plan we put on the president's desk. That's one of the most important things. And Dr. Josh has a plan that I think can be replicated across, and I hope to do so here in Mississippi, that can provide affordable primary health care, direct primary health care. It is an exciting thing for us as we look at changing Medicaid for all the better.
You know, Governor, I never have had in my life any interest in politics, but those that govern well are worth their weight and then some in gold because they're serving the people. Elected officials are supposed to be public servants. So, you know, the fact that you took your own initiative and said, wait a minute, this sounds like a good idea. I might be able to duplicate this in my state of Mississippi and help the people of Mississippi get great coverage, great care at a lower price and help save lives is impressive to me. Now, I'm guessing that if I was if I'm a governor like you and you had the initiative to spend an hour on the phone because you heard a great idea, then I would think the next step for you is maybe you'd bring in some of the biggest name doctors and have a big meeting at the old governor's mansion in Mississippi. And
that's the plan. And to bring Josh in and have him, he said he would be glad to do so, to have him come to a meeting with our physicians, with some of our hospitals, with my Medicaid director, with our insurance that covers state employees, Blue Cross Blue Shield, and say, oh, by the way, how can we help lower not only in Medicaid costs, but primary health care for all Mississippians, for corporations that might say, look, we want to take advantage of that. We want to put particularly a guy that's got a mechanic's garage. He's fixing cars. He's got 5 employees. He can't furnish them health care, but he could use this plan to do so. That is the next step. You know, Sean, I tell people that common sense is a superpower. And we have it here
it's a super rare power.
Rare power. So we are going to use that superpower as we go about working with our congressman, with the administration. Look, I am a strong and vocal supporter of Donald J. Trump. We campaigned with Rick Perry and Mike Huckabee in Florida and in Pennsylvania, and we had him here in Mississippi with Nigel Farage, their first meeting. So I know this can be done. I understand the sense of urgency that Donald J. Trump, President Trump, has for this. So we are trying, 19 of us governors who did not expand Medicaid are trying to say we did the right thing. 4 years ago, 5 years ago, we made that decision not to expand because we simply could not afford the matching fund from the state, and we knew one day it'd be going away. We're trying to be really careful. We understand that states that did expand have to have a transition period, but we don't think that can last into infinity. We don't think that the 90% that Barack Obama had promised states that did expand, that 90% expansion rate should continue past a date certain. So we are looking at the bill. We're talking to our members in Congress. I've talked with Secretary Price. What a remarkable guy. Look, the openness and flexibility I talked to the Secretary yesterday, and he said, look, if you want workforce training as mandatory, if you want that, send that waiver in. If you want co-pays, send that waiver in, and we'll review it and hopefully approve it. It's a new world. It is a remarkable opportunity for innovation for the aged, the infirm, the blind, the people that desperately will need Medicaid now and will need it into the future. So I'm encouraged, but look, Republicans have got to hold together. We have got to work for this president, this vice president, and for this bill to get it to where we all can say, yes, I am for it, I am supporting it, and that's my mission now as a governor and one of 19 Republican governors that are trying to get this bill to where it should be.
Do you, like me, are you disappointed that the Republicans rolled out this bill knowing every major conservative and libertarian think tank was against it, knowing the Freedom Caucus was against it, knowing that guys like Rand Paul, Ted Cruz, Senator Tom Cotton from a neighboring state, Arkansas, and Marco Rubio were against
Maddow,
it? Well, the Freedom Caucus guys, they were all against it, and they rolled it out anyway. Don't you think they got the cart before the horse? Don't you think they should have?
Absolutely. Sean, when I was lieutenant governor and now as governor, when I go into my Republican-controlled house.
This is the Sean Hannity Show podcast.
What I have here is a copy of Donald Trump's tax returns. We have his federal tax return for 1 year for 2005. I believe this is the only set of the president's federal taxes that reporters have ever gotten a hold of. What we have are these 2 pages, front and back, from the same 1040 form that you might have filled out when you file your taxes. And in terms of what's on here, let me give you the basics. Aside from the numbers being large, these pages are straightforward. He paid $38 million, looks like $38 million in taxes. He took a big write-down of $103 million. More on that later. If you add up the lines for income, he made more than $150 million in that year. Mazel tov. We got these pages We got this document today from a Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative journalist who's better on financial matters than almost anybody else in the business. His name is David K. Johnston. These pages turned up the other day in his mailbox. David will join us live here in just a moment. But because nobody has had the president's taxes before, we didn't know what to expect. When we showed this 2005 return to the White House to ask them if it's real, we sent this over to the White House tonight, and the White House responded basically with, yep. So we have obtained Donald Trump's tax returns tonight. His 1040 from the year 2005, the first time his federal tax returns have been made public, have been obtained by any news organization since he is a presidential candidate, let alone since he was president. They were obtained by investigative reporter David K. Johnston and his reporting shop, dcreport.org. These tax returns raise very interesting questions about how much the president's own proposed tax policies would improve his own personal bottom line. But they raise even more questions about what we haven't yet seen. Trump is the first president since the Watergate era to refuse to release his taxes of his own accord, which makes this release, who knows where it came from, both an interesting news development and potentially a historic one. With all of that, the concerns about whether he's going to be self-dealing in his tax policies, concerns about whether he might have lied or misrepresented his own financial circumstance during the campaign, concerns about whether or not he might have misstated things to the FEC. With all of that, there looms over all of this the big national security worry, right? The big almost existential worry. The greater concern, the worry that this president may be financially beholden to an individual, to an institution, to a country. And now that he's president, we won't know if he tries to use the resources and power of our country to pay off that entity to whom he is beholden. We can't know any of that without getting his tax returns. That's why presidents release their tax returns. That's why there will continue to be unrelenting pressure to find Donald Trump's tax returns, to expose Donald Trump's tax returns. And that pressure will remain every single day that he remains as president. Unless and until he releases them, the pressure will never let up. And that's why somebody has decided to leak a portion of his 2005 tax return, which is how and why we got it tonight. And I am sure it is only the start, but it's a start. And our little piece of it, we just got it. We'll go through it next.
The biggest epic fail of the alt-left propaganda, destroy Trump at all costs media in history. This is going to be remembered forever. We got his tax returns, and Donald Trump paid $38 million. He paid a higher rate than NBC News Comcast. He paid a higher rate than Romney, a higher rate than the Obamas by a long shot. A higher rate than Bernie Sanders. Oh, my God. I don't know what to say about this. As I called it, you know what this is? You go back to the Access Hollywood tape, all the NBC News reporting. It's a jihad against the president. This is not a news organization anymore. This is a liberal media corporate jihad. And that's what I called it last night. Now, putting aside the legal aspects of this, the IRS code, section 7213, makes the unauthorized disclosure of any return or return information a felony. And by the way, I'm not talking about a news organization, but the idea, we found it in the mailbox. And look at this. He paid $38 million in taxes. The breathlessness in which this is what we have all been waiting for. They're tweeting out. 2005, Donald Trump sold the property to a Russian oligarch. Now, the Russians had to know that he was going to be president in 2017 and he'd be elected in 2016. But meanwhile, NBC News didn't think he had a shot in hell on, election day last year that he would win. And they were shocked and mortified when it happened. So I kept tweeting last night, Andy Lack, who's the president of NBC News. Wow, did the moon landing really occur? Did Andy Lack ever sell a property and make a profit? I'd like to know the answer to that one. This is more than the Twilight Zone. I don't think I laughed harder than I did last night for an entire decade. He only paid $38 million in federal taxes, and he took legal deductions. There's a big breaking news story, if I've ever heard one. Joining us now is Joe Concha. He is with The Hill. He's a media reporter. And what did you think of this epic fail last night? Pretty spectacular. If they're gonna flop, they're gonna go big.
All I could think of, Sean, was 1999, and we're about to go to New Year's Eve of 2000. Remember Y2K? And everybody thought the world was going to end, and everybody's thinking, what happens when it becomes midnight? What's going to happen? And then the ball drops, and then nothing happened. And that's what this was. It was. We both like Geraldo. He's a friend of yours for a long time. I've met him a couple times. Seems like a nice guy. But this was Geraldo walking into Al Capone's vault and finding nothing. And that's what this was, because Rachel Maddow made it that way, Sean. She tweeted out at 7:36 last night, an hour and a half before her program, breaking, "We've got Trump tax returns." Oh, what? You got 1995 to 2016? She made it sound like she had years of it, and that's what drew people in. She was top trending on Twitter, and then later she clarifies, no, we just have 2005. And then the White House, smartly enough, actually preempts her own scoop and sends out a copy of it before the show even begins. And then what you were left with was an hour. And I was on Tucker Carlson's show before yours with Kimberly Guilfoyle before me, and we're both kind of watching in different studios, and I kept waiting for this other shoe to drop, and it was a big nothing burger, and nothing happened. So, yes, you're right. This is probably going to be remembered as the 21st century version of the Al Capone vault.
You know, it's funny because I saw Geraldo on today, and they were showing old video of that. And Geraldo's one of my dearest friends. And, you know, to give Geraldo props and credit, he was totally making fun of it and having a good time with it, and it doesn't bother him at all. Yeah, and he did.
30 years ago. Good for him. If you can't laugh at yourself, what can you do?
Okay, but there's a bigger narrative, and you've captured this in your column. I mean, doesn't it say a lot about what I've been saying? The mainstream media they're not fair, balanced, objective anymore. NBC News is like the Obama propaganda arm of the Democratic Party. They are the opposition party. And yet
the problem is, Sean, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, when you say, they're not objective. The problem is they think they're objective. In other words, let me read you a quote from Rachel Maddow to the Associated Press just last week when she did an interview. She says, "People want to draft me as an activist all the time. Ascribe that role to me. I'm not. The role I know I'm not is that I stopped doing that in order," it's not quite English, but the reason I know I'm not is that I stopped doing that in order to be the person who explained the news and delivered the news instead. It's a very clear line to me. In other words, she's actually portraying herself as a news anchor, somebody free of agenda, free of partisanship, and anybody who watches that show, any Democrat will tell you that obviously is not the case. So somehow she believes that she's objective. And look, you're honest with who you are. You're an opinion guy. You're a pundit. You give opinions. You're not a journalist. You're here to talk about things and give your opinion.
Hey,
That's
Joe,
what you're paid
I
for in radio
am a
and
talk
television.
show host. But,
right. By being transparent, people will respect you more than when you try to insist that you're objective.
That's a little
scary. Or not.
If she really thinks that she is a news person, that's a little frightening. I mean, because that's just so far off base that, wow, that's actually a little bit chilling. That's just a disconnect from reality that goes a little bit too far for me. But, it's a lot deeper than all of this, too. I mean, here we are. When did the Russian narrative start? Before the election. Remember, Hillary tweeted out about it, and Harry Reid, sent a letter about it, and they had been tipped off. And all the leaks that have occurred from the deep state and, all of the breathless, hysterical reporting that has gone on CNN and NBC on a regular basis about a Russian collusion story with the Trump organization, and it never happened. And then you get really solid reporters like John Solomon, 20 years AP, and somebody like Sarah Carter, and they break a story that, no, law enforcement looked into it. There are actually 2 warrants looking into the whole Russian story, and no evidence at all, as James Clapper had said, the National Director of Intelligence, that the Russians impacted our election. None. And yet they still
Clapper
keep going with it.
Yeah, Clapper said that on national television. He says, "I have seen no collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russians." And that story got ignored almost. I couldn't believe it. I said, well, that should be check and mate, right? And no, it keeps going on. And here's the irony. Everybody who is screaming for Trump to provide evidence that President Obama wiretapped Trump Tower has the same mantra, and that is, where's your evidence? Show us your evidence. Why don't you have evidence? Okay, well,
I've got evidence. How about the New York Times?
Where is the evidence around Russia? Show me the evidence. Not that Flynn had a conversation or Sessions had a conversation, as senators do. Show me a dot that connects me from Trump to Russia and affecting the election, and I cannot find it, and I want to see evidence around that, or else the story has to go away.
Well, I think Trump could actually cite the New York Times, January 19th or 20th, whatever the date was, when they used the word wiretap, as the BBC did, as McClatchy did, and as many others in cable even reported. So they were the ones that were saying wiretap. Now, it has come to my attention, and if you do a deep dig into what Solomon and Carter are reporting, I actually think what they have found is fascinating, and I keep asking them, has anybody else besides me asking you about what you're reporting, considering you've got credentials as news people going back decades? And they say no, because it defeats their narrative. All right, hang on one sec. We'll take a break. We'll come back. We'll continue with Joe Concha here.
Hannity Headline, a bite-sized version of the show that you can take with you everywhere you go. To sign up today for Hannity Headlines, go to Hannity.com.
All right, as we continue, Joe Concha is a media reporter with The Hill, and we're talking about all the fake news phenomenon that now exists in the country. Do you think, how come nobody in the media, well, I guess I know the answer to my own question, but how come nobody covered the collusion and the discovery of WikiLeaks of collusion on a large scale?
Because everybody's friends with each other in this business, and you see it on Twitter. Just go onto Twitter, and everybody's retweeting everybody's old columns out all day and patting each other on the back. So when it was time to call out a Glenn Thrush, who passed on several occasions, stories in advance, in other words, advance approval to the Clinton campaign, and then he gets hired by the New York Times, actually gets promotion from Politico. Well, no one wants to do that because everybody thinks Glenn's a swell guy and he hosts a podcast, and I want to make sure I can get an opportunity to go on there. Or John Harwood with CNBC. Or you could go on Donna Brazile. All I kept hearing was, she's the nicest person. She is, I agree. But she did pass along debate questions to a presidential candidate not once but twice. And everybody's afraid to call everybody out because it's like, boy, I don't want to throw my friend under the bus. And I'm sorry, you got to be like a doctor in these situations. Take emotion out of it and just take care of the patient. Do your job. That's it. And that's
you're
why
saying something that's really, you're saying something profound, because I see this on Twitter. I mean, all the media reporters all retweet themselves all day, and all the supposed reporters, they want the media reporters to cover how great they are, so they retweet each other. And these are the same people in the swamp that go drink and hook up with each other on a regular basis. And it's like you're like an island out there, Joe. You're on your own. You call them out, and they hate your guts for it.
And I'm actually a fairly, easy guy to get along with, and I'm in a softball league, and I play the beer pong and all that. But, there's a scene in Die Hard 2.
By the way, I'll kill you in beer pong. I'm great at beer pong.
That I will take you up on. And
you will not be standing at the end of the night.
Well, that's usually the case whether I'm winning or losing, but I hear what you're saying. But there's a scene in Die Hard 2 where John McClane's about to throw off a guy from a plane, and the bad guy says, "It's a shame I have to kill you, McClane. I was starting to like you." And McClane says, "I got enough friends," and then kicks him in the face, and he ends up in the propeller. That's me. I got enough friends. Outside of this business, I don't need to be liked. I just want to do my job. And if I do get along with some people, fine, but I'm still going to call you out on it. You screw up, Hannity, I'm on it. Trust me.
I think you've already done that, by the way, over the years at some points.
I have an archive, and people can see that. But I try to be fair, and I don't try to be cynical.
Well, listen, I seem to be a favorite target of a number of these people, and it just amuses me because I'm like you. I don't give a flying rip what any of these people think. I keep saying everybody in cable news is lazy, overpaid, rigidly ideological, and they're phonies, and they don't do their job. And, I say that, and then people write, that means you're overpaid. And I'm like, yeah, I plead guilty. I admit it, but I'm not going to give it back. And I think the difference is I feel that I'm more honest with my audience. And I honestly believe in my heart of hearts, Joe, that I take it as my mission every day. I really don't like America's precipitous decline, and I'm really hoping that we can reverse it. I believe conservatism is the answer. I try to explain it to the best of my ability. Now, part of being a talk show host, sometimes I do straight interviews with, like, the Prime Minister of Israel or maybe Musharraf when I interviewed him, or, God forbid, before her death, Benazir Bhutto. Yeah, I'll do a straight interview with some people, even some politicians sometimes. But then we'll do debate segments. Then we'll do segments where I'm trying to make my point and prove my point, and I do opening monologues that try to get there. But I'm honest. They say they're objective. They're not.
Yeah, just be transparent to who you are, that's all. You're an opinion person, say you are. You're an anchor, then be an anchor, and don't be like Jorge Ramos, who just won a Walter Cronkite Award, by the way, for 2017.
By the way, who else got that award? Everyone was a liberal.
Katie Turd got it from MSNBC, Jake Tapper got it from CNN, and Reliable Sources, a media affairs show on CNN with Brian Stelter. They all won as well. So take with that as you will. But let me say one thing.
You mean Jeff Zucker's stenographer, that guy?
That is your characterization.
By the way, it is the biggest joke on the face of the earth. There's no four people that are the opposite of Walter Cronkite, for crying out loud.
It's an award that I don't know what to say. I mean, I really focused on Ramos in a column earlier this this week, and you can't be an activist and say then you're an anchor for Univision at the same time. You have to change your LinkedIn page and say, now I'm the opinion guy, or I'm going to go out and go on marches and be a protester or an activist. But you can't then still sit there and present news as fact when it's your opinion. That's such a problem, and the fact that we're honoring that behavior is unsettling. Remember, Ramos said last year that neutrality is not an option when it comes to covering Donald Trump. That is the opposite of everything they teach in journalism school. But let me give you one more point before you have to go.
Yeah, I actually don't have time. I have to go. Joe, great segment.
Right.
You got cut off. You know what? Now he's going to write a nasty column about me. I can see it coming. All right, Joe, Concha with the Hill. Thank you.
We know you never want to miss the Sean Hannity Show. And now you never have to. Just sign up for Hannity Headlines. A bite-sized version of the show that you can take with you on your laptop, your mobile phone, everywhere you go, even to your liberal in-laws' place in Vermont.
Yeah.
And after a few hours of that, you'll be glad you brought Sean along. To sign up today for Hannity Headlines, go to Hannity.com.
All right, 25 now till the top of the hour. You want to call me? Feel free. 800-941-SEAN. You want to be a part of this extravaganza. And let's get to our busy phones. We've not had enough time for calls lately. So much out there in the news. All right, KC is in the great state of Utah. KC, hi, how are you? Glad you called.
I'm doing well. Thanks for taking my call, Sean.
Thank you for calling. We appreciate it. What's happening?
So I'm glad that the fight for the new health care bill is out in the open so we can get public comment early. I'm glad we're not doing the whole wait to pass it before you can read it. However, the bill is still, it's garbage. The way it sits right now, it really is nothing special, and if anything, it's just as bad in different ways as Obamacare.
It's beyond disappointing to me, and it's what's frustrating to me more than anything else is, we've got to ask ourselves a question here, and to me, there is absolutely no excuse at all whatsoever that after 8 years of talking and preaching and promising that they weren't ready for this moment, and they knew the moment was coming since November the 9th.
I agree. As a true conservative and as an entire, now that we have a majority House and a majority Senate, and every single one of those people ran on repealing and replacing Obamacare as one of their main platforms, and not a single one of them had a plan ready over 8 years, is infuriating to me.
Well, that part is not true. There were 9 different plans out there. They had some similarities. They all had the health savings accounts, and they all had a different approach to it. One of the things that the president said the other day is something I really agree with, and that is these new paradigms, these new models can emerge, and hence I repeat myself, and I go back to Atlas MD and Dr. Josh Umber and the fact that his practice has been duplicated all around the country successfully, and that's, you have 24/7 medical care. And it's just a great model. $50 a month for an adult, $10 a month for kids. Anything extra is minimally a minimal cost to you. 90%, 95% reductions on pharmaceuticals, 95% reduction on X-rays and things like that. You couple that with a catastrophic plan with a fairly high deductible, and you've got a cheap health care plan and a doctor at your avail 24/7. It's frustrating to me, and I do believe those things will emerge. The frustrating thing to me is they knew this opposition existed, and they just made a decision that they didn't care, and that they were going to go out there, and they were going to ignore all of the conservatives within their caucus, assuming that they could do enough arm twisting and put enough pressure on them, and then run ads in their districts and get them to capitulate. And I don't think it's going to happen that way. Now, one or two things is going to happen. It's either going to be an epic fail and an embarrassment, and I think they will at that point have done a great disservice to the president. Now, the president doesn't write bills. Congress's job is to write and to pass bills, but they're working with, they know what the president's principles are on this. And I know the president supports aspects of this, but it seems that the leadership in the House and Senate have been reluctant and resistant to talk to the opposition within their own ranks. And the person that has to do all the heavy lifting now and try and fix the mess they created is the president and vice president. And you know what? He's got other things he needs to be doing, too. And my argument is they could have had all of these disagreements worked out in private instead of this civil war that's broken out on the airwaves because of this. And I think they've done a disservice to the president. Now, if he cleans it up, it'll be a feather in his cap. It's very possible to do so. But it's going to take amendments and a lot of hard work. I'd prefer most of it be behind the scenes, and then they can get this done. And hopefully that'll happen. Anyway, good call. Appreciate it. 800-941-SEAN. You want to be a part of the program. All right, let's go to Kelly is in Charlottesville in Virginia. Hi, Kelly. How are you? We're glad you called.
Hi, Sean, and thanks for taking my call. And I would say on behalf of our president, thank you for making talk radio great again.
You're very kind to say so. I'm not. Listen, we're trying. We're doing our part here, and we're holding them accountable. And so, anyway, what's going on?
Well, Sean, what I'd like to see is when the Trump administration does tax reform, that they repeal the words federal and government from programs and replace them with taxpayer. So when we see something like the federal student loan program, it would actually be the taxpayer student loan program, or government subsidized housing would become taxpayer subsidized housing. I just think there's too many people that think that the government has endless amounts of money, and they have no money except our money. And I think we really need to, I guess I should say, re-educate the Democrats and the liberal media on this point.
Listen, the president is doing some amazing and fundamental, basic and necessary things as it relates to limiting the size and scope and influence of government. One is the hiring freeze. Two is they're going to pare down the federal workforce. Three is we're going to cut by over 50% the money that we're giving to the United Nations. Four is he's going through every single cabinet position, every single bureaucracy, and he's willing to have significant, real, dramatic cuts to limit the size, scope, and influence of government. Add to that getting rid of regulations. If we can ever get to this tax bill, which I think is priority one right after we get finished with Obamacare, repeal, replace, then, things are going to be moving in the right direction. And that's what's so frustrating. Imagine if the president would have been able to come out, they had hammered out all their differences behind the scenes. No bill is going to be perfect. No one congressman or senator is going to get everything they want. But if they built a consensus that would work for the American people, drive down costs, increase competition, create incentives for new paradigms to emerge, like in Wichita, Kansas, then we'd all be better off, and it would have been an immediate win. Now they are at risk of having this not pass because of their stubbornness. And at that point, it becomes an epic fail, and it will be an embarrassment they have created for the president. But it's really an embarrassment for themselves. And it's sad that the president now is wasting all of his time now trying to fix this mess. I don't blame him. He's not in charge of the legislative branch of government. He's in charge of the executive branch. And they knew this opposition existed. We telegraphed it for weeks before they released it. I told a lot of people behind the scenes what existed. So this was not a surprise to them. Anyway, let's get to our phones. Thank you, Kelly. Appreciate it. As we say hi, Jill, Silver City, North Carolina. Jill, how are you? Glad you called.
I'm glad I got through. Sean, I just wanted to say, I hear so many people say, can we have them make a plan and they have to use the plan that they are asking us to use?
It has to be that way.
It
has to be that way. And if they don't get that, then honestly, they've learned nothing about the mood of the American people, because the American people are sick of those games.
They would make the dog food taste a lot better if they had to eat it.
The dog food feel. So we're getting dog food for health care. I'm going to tell you something that I do in my life. I think 2 health care plans. I'll be honest, I don't really like to go to the doctor, okay? I've been blessed with pretty good health, knock on wood, my whole life. Some of my best friends are doctors. I just happen to be fortunate, and people that I really, really deeply and profoundly admire. Every one of them I know of instances, and I sit in fascination if we go out to lunch or dinner and we talk, and I ask them about how work is going and tell me interesting cases you have. all of them have saved people's lives because of their skill, their education, their hard work, their dedication. They've all saved people's lives. Fathers are on this earth raising their children because of the great work that they do. Now, so what's amazing in this whole process, they are really, really good people. But I am so sick and tired of dealing with the healthcare companies. Now, I use it for my family. I basically call my buddy and I say, all right, well, he really traps me is what happens in reality. You know, I'll go and we'll be hanging out and he'll stop by his office on a Saturday and drag me up there and give me an echocardiogram, an EKG, make me run on the stress test thing and check my blood pressure and do all that stuff and take my blood while I'm there. And I don't know if he uses my insurance. I have no idea. And I just find ways myself to pay back his kindness to a friend. Does that make sense? So, you know, if it was 3 o'clock in the morning and I couldn't get out of bed, he'd come see me. But most people don't have that. But these cooperatives that I keep talking about, they're available at a price that 90% of people can afford. I think most people can afford $50 a month as an adult for unlimited health care. In other words, that's what we call the concierge service in medicine. And that's why I have been pushing this so hard, because that's what I would want. I want when I call my doctor friend, I want him to pick up the phone and tell me I'm going to live. I want my doctor friend to say, oh, no problem, I'll come on by now. And I have that at a friendship, but the cooperatives that they built around the country are there on a business model that works, and doctors that are dedicated to helping their patients. Now, the reason I think it works is most people, how many times a year do you go, Jill, to a doctor?
Probably 4.
4? Okay, 4 times a year. You know what? Let's say the average person goes 4 times a year, or the average guy like me goes once every 2 years, and it's only because my doctor makes me go. So unless something happens, even though you have unlimited care in a cooperative, you're not going to spend your day at the doctor unless you're a hypochondriac. And then they'll probably give you happy pills for that. So, you know what? It works because most people don't go when they stub their toe. You know, I recently meaning a couple of years ago, I had purchased a really, really good knife that I carry. I carry a blade. And it's just the perfect, right within the law in New York, which I believe is, 4 inches or 4.5 inches, I forget. And so, anyway, you're not allowed to have a switchblade, so I'm really working at trying to break it in. So I can, if I ever needed it, I'd be able to pull it out, okay? So dopey me, wasn't paying attention, and I dropped it on my leg, and it went down like 4 inches. I still didn't go to the doctor. I just had my son come in and had him get me a bunch of Band-Aids, and I put a butterfly stitch up there myself. And that's how much I have a disdain for wanting to go to the doctor. Does that make sense?
Well, you did the suck-it-up Band-Aid move.
Yeah, exactly. Well, are you married? Do you have a boyfriend or something?
Oh, I'm married, yes, with children.
Okay. And how many times do you have to tell your husband to go to the doctor every 3 years?
Well, yeah, right.
He doesn't want to go, right? The typical guy doesn't want to go to the doctor.
Well, yeah, right.
Yeah, I mean, and women are
far more... I do have another idea. We could take the federal money. We could take the federal money that we need to take away from the sanctuary cities that have no common sense anymore.
Right.
And we could use that money to try to maybe fix some of this.
Right. Well, look, I think there's a lot of answer solutions out there. The Freedom Caucus, Rand Paul, all these guys have good ideas. And that's why I say go into a conference room, take away everybody's phone, lock the door, and don't come out till you're done. Do your job. I mean, that's what we do every day. We all have to do our jobs in life. Anyway, I appreciate it, Joe. Thank you. Good call, 800-941-SEAN, our toll-free telephone number. You want to be a part of the program. I will tell you that the beauty of the free market, which is what we as conservatives believe in, and there are ways to help the poor, the indigent, the elderly, the sick that don't have the means to take care of themselves. We're not going to let people die on the street. We never did before. The beauty of the free market is those companies want your business. They want your dollars. They want your money. And the way they're going to get it is to offer you a better plan at a lower price. And then you tell your friends, and then you tell your relatives, and then you tell everybody what a great doctor and what a great plan you have. And then it grows exponentially. That's the beauty of and the upside of a free market. It's going to take years for it actually to take root and show the benefits that we're talking about, though.